Hi, my name is John Murphy. I'm a researcher and instructor here in the Department of Engineering Physics at UW-Madison, and I've been asked to talk today a little bit about diverse design teams and the advantages of having diversity in your design team as far as working on a real-world project. One of the things we do when we work in a design team is we first of all have to establish a need with a customer. And we normally do that by a site visit, where we go and talk to the customer and try and understand the needs of the customers. And you can understand that if you have a very narrow group of people or a small demographic, as you go out and talk to the customer, you may not ask the right questions, you may not get the correct information, especially from a society that's as diverse as ours. So when we try to build design teams, we want lots of different viewpoints within the design teams, from all different age groups, from all different racial backgrounds, from all different political perspectives, everything, because you're trying to reach a large audience of people and you're trying to design products that can work for that group. So it's essential when you're establishing a need with a group that you have a large group of people involved in the design team to ask the questions. And that's essential when we go out and we actually perform the site visit and talk to the customer. After that, we have a situation where we have to understand the problem. So we bring the design team together and we sit and we talk and we ask questions amongst ourselves to try and really get a grasp of what the problem is. You find that with a group of people who have different perspectives, that you come at the problem and a lot of pertinent and important questions are asked that feed into defining what the problem is that you have to go about solving. And again, there it's essential that you have a lot of different viewpoints, a lot of different perspectives on it. So having this built into the team is essential. After we do that, a component of understanding the problem is writing what's called a problem statement. And again that more or less bounds the problem that you're trying to solve for the client. It's not overly specific, but again, it's important to have everybody's input from the team to formulate the problem statement to make sure that you're addressing the right problem for the client. And that's a vitally important component of the design process, and diversity feeds into that significantly when we are writing the problem statement. Once you've got a problem statement written, what you then do is you go to a brainstorming session. And the brainstorming session is really a potpourri of ideas. We don't want to evaluate the ideas, we don't want to shoot down any ideas, and this is probably the most important aspect of the design process, where you have lots of different ideas and lots of different perspectives. So you can see naturally where diversity and people from all different walks of life giving feedback on ideas as to how you would go about solving the problem is critically important. If you have, as I tell my students, if you have 4 or 5 ideas you come up with, well, you're not brainstorming appropriately. We want our students to come up with 60, 70, 80 different ideas, design ideas, as to how they would go about building maybe their fantasy design that would solve this problem. So it's very self-evident that having lots of different perspectives on how you would solve the problem is critical. We also encourage the students to come up with wacky ideas. And even if they're off-the-wall ideas, they might lead you to an idea, they might make you think of a perspective that you hadn't thought of before, and they would lead you in the direction of coming up with a very clever, innovative solution. So when you look at teams that are trying to build innovative solutions from a problem-solving perspective, diversity and a very broad perspective is critically important. In fact, it's the most important aspect of the design team, and you especially see it in the brainstorming session. So we emphasize this over and over again. We have a team leader that day who's facilitating ideas. We don't evaluate ideas. There are no bad ideas when we brainstorm, and we try to hit every single person in the team to just literally do a data dump, so to speak, on what they would love to see in the final design that would still meet the client's objectives. After that, after we've come up with all these ideas in the brainstorming session, we then have to use a process of evaluation where we have to whittle out ideas that aren't necessarily bad but may not be feasible. They may not be technically possible. They may not meet the client's objectives. And we go through a fairly rigorous process there where we again get feedback from everybody on the team based on their knowledge, their design knowledge, their engineering knowledge, from a very practical standpoint on what can be done and what can be accomplished. So again, getting perspectives from everybody is critical, because there's knowledge, there's all sorts of knowledge that each student has that feeds into this process and allows us to come up with what ideas work and what ideas aren't going to work. We sort of bound the problem for them, and we give them some criteria to evaluate with, but the idea being that the perspective of all different students feeds into this process. So you're going to see this as a common theme throughout my entire talk about design, is that having a broad view of things and a broad perspective, which one person can't have all of these perspectives and all of these viewpoints, is critical in making the design process work. So we then go through this process where we evaluate ideas, and we get down to a certain number of ideas that we've brainstormed that we think are feasible to do, and we then integrate that into a comprehensive design, and it's a very preliminary design, and the students have to sit down and maybe sketch out an idea, come up with some sort of concept, even if it's a rough concept, and we then present that to the client in an early presentation to get feedback from the client at that point. And the students then, as I said, get feedback. They find out what the client liked, what they didn't like, and then we have them go back through this entire design process again, but in a larger group and where they actually produce it. Now when they go through this process again, they have to come up with more ideas. We actually ask them to rewrite a problem statement in a larger group. Then they have to go through and brainstorm again and evaluate again. But you can understand that they've now gone into a larger group numerically of people. There's even a broader perspective. There's even more diversity within the team. And it's even more important now to get everyone's perspectives, everyone's viewpoints, everyone's ideas on what might work. Because when we do this the first time through, we do it in smaller groups. So the students get this perspective that as you go to larger and larger teams, the human element becomes very complicated, becomes harder to do, but it's even more important, and you get an even better design out because you have all of these different perspectives represented. So when we follow through and do this in the large team, we then come up with an integrated design. We then begin building the design, we fabricate it, we test it, we inevitably find problems with the design, we iterate back, we go back, have to redesign, which is an integral part of the design process, is failing and allowing the students to fail. And they're doing this in the context of always re-brainstorming ideas, always looking at other perspectives of teammates. They test, and ultimately they produce a product that we present to the client at the end of the semester. And the idea being here that what we don't want is one sort of lone genius coming up with all the ideas, because that's not the best solution to the problem. If you follow this process correctly, you get feedback from all the different team members, and it feeds into designs that I've seen throughout the last 7 or 8 years that I've been involved in this class that are the best solution to the problem. So to me, in a microcosm, when you look at the design process, it is designed for diversity. Or it might be the other way around, that diversity, I mean, it's a chicken and egg argument. You've got to have different viewpoints to make the design process work, feeding into this process so you can come up with good designs that will, of course, be very valuable for a large demographic of people, and you get all of the sort of genius from each different person, all of their perspective, all that they've seen in their life, feeding into the design to make it as effective as possible.